Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch and you are in a position to listen to the three esteemed speakers. It's about funding, so you may be a little more interested in it than other topics in the morning. The question of election funding goes to the core of the question of how good your democracy is. If your democracy is essentially based on an electoral form of democracy, and you have elections which as an instrument to judge or gauge or understand the preferences of people in the society, then the way in which those elections are conducted become very important for the health of the democracy itself. And in that sense, the more recent debates that we have had regarding electoral bonds, regarding transparency in election funding and so on, are very important given the topic that we are discussing today. And we have three very important speakers, both eminent and experienced speakers joining us for this session. We have S.Y. Qureshi, we have Nitin Sethi, and we have Roshan Kishore. All three have excelled in their professions in different ways. I will start with Sri S.Y. Qureshi. Sri S.Y. Qureshi is well known to all of us. He joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1971 and rose to become the 17th Chief Election Commissioner of India in 2010. He introduced a number of electoral reforms, such as the creation of a Voter Education Division, Expenditure Monitoring Division, the India International Institute of Democracy and Election Management, and launched the National Voters' Day during his tenure. In October 2017, he was appointed the Ambassador of Democracy by the International Institute of Democracy and Electoral Assistance in Stockholm, along with Kofi Annan, of which he was a board member till 2021. He is the author of the book, An Undocumented Wonder, The Making of the Great Indian Election, published in 2014, The Population Myth, Islam, Family Planning and Politics in India, published in 2021, and has edited The Great March of Democracy, 7 Decades of India's Elections, published in 2019. Lovely. There it is. Mr. Qureshi's name.
It is called India's Experiment with Democracy, The Life of a Nation Through Its Elections. It came out 3 months ago.
Lovely. Mr. Qureshi's name also appeared in the Indian Express list of most powerful Indians in 2011 and 2012. So it's a great pleasure to have him with us, and I would like to invite him to make the first presentation. About 20 minutes, sir? Yeah, thank you.
I'll prefer to sit down because I have a knee problem. I have been a civil servant, but I can assure you my spine is intact. It's only the knee. It's only the knee which is troubling me. Thank you. Normally, since there are no charts and no facts and not figures, I should not be using PowerPoint. But as a communication PhD, when you hear, you retain about 10%. When you hear and see, you retain about 30%. So to add to your retention, I'm using both the communication. Political finance regulation and transparency and level playing field, that is the most important thing. Money, I am sorry to admit that money power is the only unsolved problem of ECI. When I took over as Chief Election Commissioner of India in my inaugural press conference, I gave myself 2 challenges. One was voter apathy. There used to be 20%, 25% turnout in metros in many cities. I said, I'll deal with that. Youth were not participating. And the other was money power. And I'm very happy to say that in the first voter apathy, we have very successfully launched the voter education program. And every election since 2010 has given us higher and higher and higher turnout in history. So that has been a tremendous success. The money power, initially we had great success. In my book, An Undocumented Wonder, I had discovered and listed 40 modus operandi of cheating. In fact, my dilemma was how to caption it. If I say 40 ways to cheat, they will say Election Commission of India is telling people to cheat. 40 different ways he's teaching them. So I gave it a different heading, how to stop cheating. The 40 different ways these guys cheat and how to stop it. So money, all in the context of money power, in the chapter of money power. But later on, after initial success of 3-4 years, we started raiding farmhouses, hotels, home, helicopters of chief ministers, and vehicles of the director generals of police. And we are getting money, thousands of crores we have collected over the last few years. That system is still ongoing, but they have found newer ways to cheat. Now, democracy needs money. For election, political parties need money. Therefore, they have to raise money. We cannot grudge the role of money. Only thing, it has to be regulated, and we have to ensure that it does not become a level playing field only of the rich. Even the poorer people can contest election. Now, the political financing, which is the subject for today, first is funding of election expenditure of candidates and political parties, and the election expenditure. The other is funding of political parties. Lots of people suggest that, there is so much of corruption and let there be the state funding of elections, which I oppose. Because funding of elections, it is not the white money in the election which bothers us. As you know, for a Lok Sabha election, it's about, limit is currently now 90 lakhs or maybe 95 lakhs. So let's go by 90 lakhs. So, but we know anecdotally that people spend 9 crores and 90 crores. We know it. Then people say, why don't you take action? Look, we can take action only when we have evidence. We have only anecdote. We hear it in the drawing room. Politicians come and tell us, I spent so much money, catch me if you can. I cannot catch. So what can I do? That's my limitation. So because we act within the ambit of law. So I have been suggesting an alternative, funding of political parties based on their actual performance. And I have suggested give 100 rupees for every vote that you get. Now, one thing which cannot be fudged in the country, in accounting, is the votes that you get. If you got 100 votes, multiplied it by 100. If you got 1 lakh vote, multiplied by that. And it will add up to about 5,000, 6,000 crores. About 67 crore people voted last time. So even if you were to give 100 rupees even to independent candidate who gets only 1 vote, I'm happy to give him 100 rupees. At least he can have ice cream when he goes home. So then we will not be accused of not treating everybody equally. But funding of political parties, we can give enough money that whether 6,000 crores will be enough for them. Yes, it will be enough for them, based on their own account, which they have submitted to us, that in 5 years they have collected only 5,000 crores on paper. So we are giving them 7,000 crores, and it will also absolve them of begging, borrowing, stealing, twisting their arm. We'll give them the check gracefully. And 71% of European countries have this system. If it can work well there, why not in India? Then, the law provides for a cap on expenditure by the candidate. 90 lakhs, as I mentioned, it is raised from time to time, currently 90 lakhs. So, and it is not in the Act, not by the Election Commission, but by the Law Ministry. Election Commission can, of course, recommend. So, but there is no cap on political parties' expenditure. Now, I can spend only 90 lakhs, but my party spend 9 crores on me. So where is the level playing field? And why can't we have a cap on political party expenditure also? Maybe equal amount. UK, from where we borrowed the system, has a cap on political parties. So and if we do that, complaint was whether we should have simultaneous election, because there's so much of money they spend. And one estimate from Center for Media Studies was 60,000 crores were spent on the last election, not on organizing it. Organizing election is only about 4,500 crores. But 60,000 crores by political parties and candidates. If the moment you put a cap on political parties, it will come down to 6,000 crores from 60,000. It's so easy, it is in the hands of the government, but government will not do it. They will only complain, but they will not do it. Then they have to disclose their expenditure 3 times during the campaign and once after the election is over. And we have been appointing for the last 25, 30 years, from in session days, election expenditure observers. Now, more organized, we have set up as one of the 2 things, my challenges, I set up an expenditure monitoring division, full-fledged with a commissioner rank officer of IT, so heading it. Where does party get this fund from? Corporates, private donations, membership, etc. That it is the top one which worries us the most. Then no government corporation can donate funds to any political party, no foreign source. But that was earlier, after the amendment of CRA Act, political, the foreign contributions have now been exempted from this restriction. Now, even foreign funding is allowed, which is very dangerous thing, highly objectionable thing happened, because when investigation had found that both the BJP and Congress were guilty of receiving foreign funds, the act was amended with retrospective effect of 40 years. Now, you know, we have seen how Russia has influenced the American elections. So what is the guarantee which countries are interfering in our elections? This is the most dangerous thing which has happened, but nobody has protested. Then one irony which I have been talking about, that the election has become the root cause of corruption in the country. Because when you spend more crores of rupees, you have to collect more. And how do you collect? By all the legal and illegal means, mostly illegal means. And there is always a quid pro quo. There is no free lunch. Quid pro quo is they can influence policies. You give them contract, you give them licenses, you give them bank loans which they run away to London, as you know. So how many are camping there? So then they influence appointment of bureaucrats. Who should be the Joint Secretary Petroleum Investigation, Exploration? That is decided by one company which has this business. Who should be the minister? You know, what was that case? And lots of journalists were exposed when ministers' appointments were being discussed. And the result that this has become government of the rich, by the rich. Now, current concerns are there is no transparency of source. Even before the electoral bond, 75% of the money was collected by cash and the source was unknown. So that gave a handle to the Finance Ministry, Mr. Arun Jaitley, to come up with the scheme about which I'm going to talk about. Now, electoral bond made it worse. And he said, you know, when it has an interesting story. In 2017 budget speech, I was on watching the TV. He made a very beautiful statement, which was music to my ears. He says, without transparency of political funding, free and fair elections are not possible. Exactly what we were saying. His second statement was equally good. For the last 70 years, we have failed to achieve that transparency. Now, what will be your expectation from the third sentence? That now he'll introduce transparency. Third sentence was that I'm killing whatever transparency existed till today, from tomorrow. And what was the transparency then? Every donation of more than 20,000 was reported to the Election Commission, which means we put it on the website, which was known to you, 20,000. Electoral bond, even 20 crores or 200 crores, nothing will be known to you who had donated to whom. And the reason given, corporates do not want transparency, they want secrecy because they are very scared. Because if I give to one party, the other party will bash me up. What nonsense. For 60, 70 years, these corporates have been donating to all the parties. At the same time, 4 candidates are contesting, they are giving to all 4. whichever party comes to power, it doesn't matter to the corporate because they're funding all of them. So they had no problem for 70 years. Suddenly the problem was discovered and opacity was introduced. Now they want secrecy, you want transparency. Whose need is and whose requirement is more important? So transparency has been killed for good, but I will offer a solution also. Of course, citizen civil society, they're upset. Judicial, 2002 Supreme Court, some civil society had gone to the Supreme Court and they say, we want transparency. We don't know who our candidates are. What are the criminal cases against them? What is their financial background? How can we vote in the dark? And the Supreme Court said it is under the right of information and the freedom of speech and expression. They are entitled to know, and they made it compulsory that every candidate, while filing his nomination, will give two affidavits, one about his criminal antecedent, the other about the financial antecedent, so that people make an informed choice, because this information we make public. Expenditure item, let's skip it. Solution offered. I have been suggesting people suggest state funding of elections. We have been opposing it because it won't stop black money. White money, 90 lakh check, I can stop and I can control, but 9 crore which is coming from here and there, how will I control? So my check which I give you will become an addition to the black money, the dirty money which you are already using. So therefore, I have suggested funding of political parties based on their actual performance. Some people say it should be given before. So if we start giving before, 205 to 100 parties will get born in 1 month. Because free election, government se aa raha hai, chalo party banate. Now, and Aam Aadmi Party is the case in point. The very first election, they won the election without money, but they established their credentials. Now they are entitled to 100 rupees per voter, as I'm suggesting. So now, how to clean up? This is the topic, and this is perhaps my last slide also. Now, public funding of political parties, complete ban on private funds then. Then set up a national electoral trust. If a corporate is donating to a party, the other party may come down on it, look, why did you give to Congress and why not to me if I'm the BJP? But if I donate to trust, then you are not scared of anybody. And the trust will assign this money according to your performance, which we have been talking about. Then there should be an independent audit. Current practice is every party has, party card holders are the auditors. They only do the whitewash job. They don't do an honest audit. We have been saying that we give you a list of 20 auditors to choose from. All parties are opposing it because the audit should be done independently and it should be made public. It should be put in the public domain. And then electoral bonds may be transparent. I have written articles on this. In fact, I am very proud to say that in one article which I wrote in Indian Express, I got an email from no less than Mr. Fali Nariman. And he said, Qureshi, this is the best article I've ever read, and he wrote a letter to the editor. Normally, we write letters to the editor. The editor wrote a letter to me that we have received a letter from Fali Nariman, which we are publishing, and we want to share with you. He's appreciate. Because I had explained some of the things which I have mentioned to you, but the solution which I had offered. I said, if you're so much in love with the electoral bond, let it be. Just disclose the owner, the giver and the taker to me. All that I want, this is the 30-second decision for the people in power, 30 seconds. Just let me know who gave it to whom so that I can keep an eye on the quid pro quo. Then cap on political party expenditure. Again, it is in the hands of the government, put a cap. UK has learned this model and immediately the expenditure will come down and shorten the election period. Now, 7 phases, 8 phases, of which we are guilty for a good reason we conduct election in phases, basically to save lives. But the times have changed. We should go back to one-day poll, because if the election extends to 2 months and 2.5 months, every day millions of people, rupees are flowing. That would stop if the election time is shortened. These are various acts, but I will skip them. Thank you so much. This book has 10 articles on all the topics which I talked about and many, many more.
Thank you, Mr. Qureshi, for ending before time. You didn't take your full time, so we can have more time for discussions towards the end. Next in line is Nitin Sethi. Nitin is a journalist and the trustee of the Reporters Collective Trust. He is a visiting faculty at Ashoka University. He has written much over the last few years on India's political economy, natural resources, environment, climate change, economy, public finance and development. He has also won several awards, including the ACGS Award for Investigative Journalism and the Prem Bhatia Award for Environmental Journalism. He has worked with several groups in the past, including the Business Standard, the Scroll, the Hindu, the Times of India, Down to Earth, and so on. He has also been the media lead at the National Foundation for India and a partner at Land Conflict Watch, besides advising several media and non-profit organizations in a pro bono capacity. Nitin, over to you.
Hi. Trouble is you hand over the bio to them and they read it back to you as if, and then you act as if, oh, I did not know you were saying such nice things about me. This is all fake. Two, I think I'm a little offended with the hosts. After a set of huge luminaries in the first half, then a decent lunch, you then invite a journalist to talk about things that the experts have already talked about. You clearly are going to fail. So I'll stick to what journalists should do ideally, is to stick to anecdotes, which will help you perhaps get a little entertained and wake up if you didn't have coffee. So there are several ways of looking at these electoral bonds process itself and what transpired. I'm presuming most of you, because you're students of journalism, you would have read about the basic details of what these electoral bonds do. Basically, as Dr. Qureshi said, you can get unclear money that you do not know where it came from, whether it was taxed or not taxed, but you can get it through a bank channel. You can get it through bank, from X person's bank to your bank. Nobody else comes to know who was the X person from whose bank it came. How many conduits were there in the middle who took that money from X and gave it to A, B, C banks. If you look at the numbers that you're talking of, so far in the few years that electoral bonds has collected money, we're looking at somewhere on the range of 20,000 crores. I think by the time this window closes, we'll be looking at around 24,000 crores. Now, contrary to the fact that, we broke the story, so I should be proud about it, but if you look at it the other way around, 23,000 crores is really not a big sum. If you look at the size of Indian elections, as Mr. Qureshi was saying, on an average general election, you can spend around 60,000 crores legally, roughly. I know I come from two states where much more money is spent just in two small states with much lower populations. To know the amount of money that is spent in cash and in digital transactions can roughly be in the range of 1.5 to 2 lakh crores. I've seen individual candidates who spent up to 20, 30 crores on their own in constituencies where there are less than 6,000 or 10,000 voters. So the sum is really huge. Compared to that, this digitally banked money coming through electoral bonds is really a small sum, which to you should put the question, then why should anyone bother about it? Why should the party in past really get so concerned if others say, let's pull this down, this is not a good habit? It's really tiny sums. It's just 20,000 crores over 3-4 years. 3,000 crores roughly, I'm presuming we'll collect in this 15 days window, 4,000 crores. It's nothing compared to what's going to be spent in the 2024 elections. So one question to ask is, why is it vital for any political party? Why is everyone so agitated about it? I mean, it might diminish the value of the story that we did and the work that people have done about it, but it's a critical question to ask. Why is this money that comes from sources that you do not know, but through a banking channel to the bank of a political party? Why does it make sense for, say, BJP in this case, or whoever else was in power subsequently, to hold on to this as if this is really critical, where it's not? By all anecdotes, I'm sure of you going around the country looking at elections, you'll find it's peanuts. I'll leave this as a question with you and we'll circle back to it hopefully by the end of the conversation. there's a very simple way to address it and say, hey, look, you don't have transparency. Corporates should have no control over our elected representatives. When you open up this channel, you create a legal channel for corporates to invest in politics. And fairly, as any intelligent business person would, if you invest in something, you're hoping for a rate of return which is quite fair. And investing in politics is high risk, because you might invest in two candidates, one of them or neither of them might not make it past the size that makes them an elected representative, which means if you're taking a high risk, you're also seeking a higher interest rate on your investment. So as a politician, if I put, say, as a businessman, if I put 1 crore behind a politician, say, let him be or let her be the candidate for my constituency, I'll back you. I'm presuming if she wins, she will bring me back 5 in the next 5 years. That's the only logic by which a business person or a corporate would invest in it. Right, so what you've done with the electoral bonds is, what was always happening, you've given it a legitimacy that did not exist in the eyes of the law. You can go one step further than this, and there are countries who've gone one step further than this, when people say, let's disclose who gives these monies. Corporates particularly give monies to political parties or representatives. We can just disclose it. That's the format that the US follows, right? It actually says you can have these systems where you can donate, give back a candidate before elections, after elections. All you have to do is register and say you are giving this much money. Now, in your imagination, you must wonder, is that the route that the country wants to go at? And what are the consequences of moving in that direction? And my guess is, journalists shouldn't guess because we're very bad at election guessing anyway, but if you were to guess, where would you go a step further than this? You would go in the step of saying, and I'm presuming, I'm willing to bet a cup of coffee on this with any one of you, that when the court's order comes post this round of last window of electoral bonds, it'll likely say what happened in the past is over, unfortunately. Henceforth, whoever donates through electoral bonds must give their names out, right? Now, you would have ended up in a strange space. You would have actually ended up in a space where you've legitimized corporate funding of electoral processes. Whereas you started, at least principally, from a place in Indian democracy which said corporates should not have influence over politics. We always did have. I mean, that's crony capitalism, and all those phrases originated out of these kind of movements of cash that funded and created elections from periods of independence and before. But if you reach a point where there is now a legal legitimacy to corporates funding your elected representatives and your political parties, you're in a completely different level altogether. All you have left, which you had for a while, you anyway had a lot of black money, as Mr. Qureshi said, flowing through the systems. What you had was a little shame about it and a little pretension about it. It's a choice as a democracy you have to make. Say the US has made a choice, we'll not have any shame about corporates investing in politics. Now, do you as a country want that shame to be retained, and does it help you as a democracy improve? And there are different divergent views on it. There are some clear views which says, might as well have transparency because these chaps will always keep funding, might as well have it in place. The other is, if you keep the pretense of shame on, at least you can hold them responsible in different ways than legally. Now, those are two directions you can go. There's the other part that Mr. Qureshi touched upon, I think, which is very vital and gets slipped off very often because us upper middle classes, I'm presuming most of us are that here, are more invested in clean politics rather than the principles of equity in politics and the principles of bringing equality, equal opportunities for different communities and classes to participate in electoral democracy. Is what happens when this kind of digital funding through banked routes in a more centralized approach reaches largely one party, the party in power, whether it's in state or center, etc. If you look at the patterns, it's largely the parties in power in the states who are getting this money or the party in center which is getting this money. And in large donors, most of the money, as Mr. Commodore Lokesh Batra keeps pointing out every month, comes in dollops of 1 crore plus, which means it's not you and I. It's clearly some people who can afford to spend that much money and get a return on it. What it does is, it tends to concentrate the large available capital that gets invested into politics in the hands of clearly a few dominant parties. What it does is, it disenfranchises the small community groups that aspire to be political classes. So you may find that Dalit politicians in different parts of the country may not be able to garner those funds, because if largely the funding is going to now come through bank channels from corporates, Clearly, the marginalized are not going to get those money. It is a certain vested interest who hold a certain social capital and wealth and engage with power over last generations who will repeatedly get this money. And it's quite visible even today, which is why in the first round, which is the only time the data came out, 98% of the funds went to the BJP out of the electoral bonds. From the annual reports that we assess, around 74% now goes to BJP. The rest 25% gets distributed over all other parties. So they get more than what next 10 parties put together get. And that's only because they're in power. It's not ideologically moved money. This is, as we say in Hindi, forgive me for the use of the word, Suryavanshi money, money that goes towards the rising sun. So whoever the sun is rising, this money tends to go towards them. What it does is it disenfranchises these communities. What it also does is creates, in some sense, without saying so, a monolithic system of governance. Because you're feeding the same beast and making it bigger than bigger. It overshadows other beasts. I'm not saying they're any better or any worse. But to me, after 20 or 25 years of journalism, you don't remain optimistic. You became at best skeptic, and hopefully you're not, a cynic. If I'm going to remain in that belt where I'm skeptical about things changing rapidly in our democracy and things suddenly improving, my hope is if we are going to have a corrupt political economy built out of this kind of electoral funding, I'd rather have a decentralized corruption. I'd rather that money goes to many other people than remain in the hands of few. And are there examples of decentralized corruption in India? Fascinatingly, there are. And they work wonderfully well. They have not attempted to change the nature of democracy. In fact, they've dealt with a more cynical understanding of what Indian democracy does to them and has adapted to them. These are states in the Northeast. They very factually have figured out the Indian state's relationship with the regions in the Northeast is almost like an agency function. We control you, we own you, we'll deal with you the way we want because you're border states, we need you in a certain way. It's more about the lands than the people. There's a whole history to that, and I'll not get into that. Now, what does these states do? Let me take two examples which are closer to my heart because I have some relations there. Say Arunachal, Nagaland, and Manipur. There's 70% voting, right? For all measures of saying, are they really emphatic and they believe in democracy, seem to believe in democracy more than many of us, at least in UP, Bihar, Delhi. In Arunachal, there are constituencies that have 98% voting. It's incredible. And these are parts where people have to walk 6 kilometers, 8 kilometers to find their next booth. And what do you imagine 90-year-old people walking down and giving that single vote to a candidate? It seems to be incredible. But there's also a similar, parallel, fascinating character happening in that area. Whatever is the party in power in center automatically comes into power in one of these states. Whether it happens at the times of election or whether 6 months later, it does happen. So in an old example of Mr. Gyogang Apang, who was the chief minister in Arunachal, if I'm not mistaken, I might be off by 1 or 2 numbers in this. He had 59 MLAs of the Congress first time he came to power. When BJP came to power in Delhi, all of 59 of them went into BJP. When Congress came back, all 59 came back. Now, you might say, oh, this is corruption. This is actually great intelligence. Because if 90% of your funding is linked to what will be sent from Delhi and there's no other private sector available, there's no state revenues available, you are synced to Delhi by hook, crook, or other methods. Therefore, you do not fight the system. You turn it around and say, this is what it is. You might as well go, vote, get a little bit. But the third part of this in Arunachal, Nagaland, and to less extent in Manipur, which is fascinating, is the levels of corruption are beautifully distributed. And it is truly beautiful. I'm not saying this cynically or skeptically. I'm actually saying this in appreciation of what people have learned to do over there. If you went to any of the constituency elections going to be held in the next 3 months, you'll find villagers going to their candidates saying, this is all the things I want in the next 3 months. Which can include getting your hospitals repaired, going for surgeries, getting your houses done, getting 4-wheel drives because you don't have roads, so you can't have other cars, you get 4-wheel drives or motorcycles, getting your school children educated in public-private schools outside Arunachal or Guwahati, hopefully, getting large surgeries done in Delhi. All of these are being done in the next 3 months. And villagers have rights to go and ask it of the candidates. Candidates cannot, unlike in UP, Bihar, rest of India, say, no, I only have 5,000 rupees each to give you. They will actually distribute this, and once they come into power, they'll actually distribute, I've seen this personally, they will distribute contracts to their community in an open forum where he'll say, this is how I'm distributing the fruits of corruption. And they'll be held accountable for it. Aapne 2 contract usko diye the, why didn't you give us this time? That kid has got 4 crores, I only got 50,000. And there'll be an open discussion where it's actually distributed. Now what they've done is they've used and they've figured out this democracy in its way that it functions. Electoral democracy particularly is perverted, and they've utilized it to their ends. Now, my fear is that with electoral bonds and the formal recognition of corporate funding of political parties, we are pushing the entire country into that direction. That on the face of it, it might look very efficient. You might get lots of money moving through white channels, etc., and we'll come to that later. And you'll find people are still voting fairly well. And you'll find there's a clear majority of one leader or the other coming out with great clarity and much more efficiency. You get efficiency in the system in that sense. What we'll find is the labyrinth of this democracy will be built on a distributed economy that nobody acknowledges. That it will be built on only some people trying to subvert the system so systematically that it will no more be conversation. So say take Nagaland. The per capita expenditure on elections in Arunachal and Nagaland is the highest in the country. It's not Bihar, UP, Tamil Nadu, Arunachal, or any of the southern states which are in economic terms much better. So you might pay 5,000 rupees to a candidate here. There you can end up paying 1 lakh to a candidate. I've seen candidates who have to stand outside roads where bidding happens for their votes. They fly out college children from Bombay, Bangalore, and Delhi for a single vote there. My fear is this corporate funding and its acceptance provides the fulcrum where the rest of the country can move in that direction. Where you feel so disenfranchised with the electoral process that you engage with it because it's essential. It still gets your nalas, it still gets your permits, it still gets you something. But at the end, you're so disenfranchised that you build your own systems that subvert it and live alongside, and it becomes normalized. And that to me is the deepest fear of electoral bonds. These simple things of transparency and all as essential. I think they're useful tools. I mean, I don't want opaqueness, but at the other level, is transparency enough? The other hand is also the second part. Do I have another 5 minutes? 5, perfect. The other part is this cap on expenditure that we have. Again, as somebody was speaking in the previous session talking about this 3% cap on how much states can borrow based on their GSDP. This cap is also as fictitious and imaginary an idea of morality. Is 90 lakhs good? Is 90 lakhs good for Bardmer with 300 square kilometers constituency, 5 lakh voters? Is it the same for UP? Is it the same for Arunachal where I have 300 square kilometers but 10,000 voters only? Now, how do these caps work? And then you have an entire plethora of documentation, and as Mr. Qureshi was saying, these inspectors all over who are observers, who are monitoring every chai dukan, every petrol guy and saying every rally, kitna chai piya, kitna petrol gaya. And the election commission collects this tomb of records of how much every candidate spent. What has it given to us? Does it come out of a false morality about expenditures in elections adopted from Anglo-Saxon world from where this nature of democracy came to us? Can we revisit it? I'm leaving it as a question, not that I have an answer, because if I had, I wouldn't be a journalist. I would have shifted to better paying jobs. But the question you have to ask is, what is this 90 lakh limit? What is this 50 lakh limit? How do we apply those? Are we just creating a fiction for ourselves so that we can live happily with each other? And let this hypocrisy function? I think these questions are more fundamental, and to stop at electoral bonds, I mean, it's nice, it's really worked, it's given everyone a tool to bash this government, etc. But to come back to this question which I started off with, why is this money important? If it's such peanuts, relatively, it might grow over time. It might become from, say, 2,000 crores every window to 6,000 crores. That's what we project. It started with somewhere around 700 crores a window. It's now reached around 4,000 crores a window. Not a big sum at all. You have to think the other way. What does a party need this kind of money for? Why do you need banked money which can be transferred digitally and unaccounted for? As Mr. Qureshi said, it can come from a foreign source, it can come from a domestic company that you can never track. Technically, companies are supposed to be disclosing how much amount they give to electoral bonds in their annual report. Just it happens to happen there are so many lakhs of shell companies that in 2 years of my team working, we've been able to dig out only 2, and we'll come out with the names later, but only 2. Because there are lakhs and lakhs of them, that database is not something you can rift through very easily. The top BSE companies, you would think the top 500 companies, considering most of the sum is going in the chunks of 1 crores plus, would be the main funders, right? Not the small peanut companies with 10 lakh capital, etc. Only 4 of them have ever donated electoral bonds in the since 2018. Most of the money has not come from them. 98.8% of the money for electoral bonds has not come from large BSE 500 companies. It's come from elsewhere. So you know this is obviously not coming from any source that you and I can figure out. It's not Mr. Adani's big corporates. It's not Reliance's. It's not any of the top corporates' large things. I think Tata had some 270 crores donation through electoral bonds. That's all. They give more through electoral trusts. But where does the money gets used? Now you start thinking, is this a kind of money which is more efficiently spent by a party as a particular expenditure on which this is useful and no other kind of money, whether in black or other routes, can be used? And you see, this is the realm in which you guys live more often than we did, is the digital spending. Because when you pay international platforms for advertising, the money has to be moved through bank channels. That's where you get this money. If you pay for large corporate services to your party, is where largely you need to move digital money and through bank routes. So if you want to pay for chartered helicopter services from an ex-Ukrainian firm, banking channels. If you want to pay Facebook for the number of ads you need to present, so if you look at the Facebook ad library, if you've done some of the work, you'll show how much money they are able to spend. The bang for the buck or the digital ads are much higher than this print ads now. So for a rupee spent on Facebook, they can reach much more people, even though recall value is lower than they can by spending a rupee on Hindu or Times of India. So the money you need is small. To reach 1 million on Facebook, you need around 150 rupees. Again, you can do the equivalent of ad space in print. You know how the trade-offs are. Yes, Facebook, you have to keep repeating the ads to turn you into a Pavlovian dog where you start imagining the hero looks like the hero or the evil looks like the evil. But the costs are very low over there. And the volumes you can produce of attention are very high. So you start instead looking at what are the kinds of places where in future or today political parties would need to essentially transfer money through banks to get services. And these would not be the small party offices in small districts. It will be from the headquarters to large corporates who are delivering certain services. And those kind of services, I'm leaving to your imagination what they are. Some have been discovered, some have not been written about. I'm presuming this election will produce some. And the last, and I'll leave with this anecdote. Why did this all come out in the first place? If you remember, initially when these electoral bonds were presented in the parliament, the rules came out, most of the political parties were hush about it. They didn't make much noise. They said something or the other, but more or less they were okay because, as Dr. Qureshi was saying, the retrospective effect of taking away FCRA prohibitions on political parties have been removed. So both Congress and BJP were quite okay with it because both of them, otherwise, some of them would have had to go to jail. Why it came out was because there was an officer inside the government. And usually, if you understand how the services work, most officers partake in the fruits of the government. And there are all ranges of fruits that you can get out of being in a government. One officer was really piqued by what was happening. And in all the files that we got out, some 700 pages, in first time in at least my professional life for 25 years, this officer, a very junior level, director level IAS officer who does not have too much of space to be himself or herself, actually writes down, the Prime Minister's office has asked us to do something illegal. He actually pens it down because he's so scared of what's going to come with this. And he pens it, obviously got transferred within 2 months, but he put it down. And that's what triggers everything, because that makes it too evident. It's very rare in government files. You don't read government files and ministers saying, yes, I'm going to be corrupt in this case. Right? They find sophisticated ways of explaining what they're doing, how they're doing, and without saying who will benefit out of it. In this case, the officers themselves were so scared that they kept on putting on record, maybe not, let's not maybe do it, maybe not, think again. Can the PM say it again? And the PM is saying, yes, do it again. So if the finance minister is asked, should you do it? The finance minister within 10 minutes says, yes, do it. And it moves. And therefore the file recordings were so scary for the officers that it became, when we started reading it, became very evident that it's troubling even if you want to call it a deep state or the state, whatever. It was troubling even them. That once this comes into place, we won't get a share of the pie. It wasn't about being too honest. It was about the fact that many of the ministers would not get a share of the pie. That money would go to a central kitty through a single button. So it's a very efficient system. It goes into the party that you want to give it to, it goes through a single window. And this, for most corporates, is a very efficient system. More corporates prefer a single window system of corruption simply because it's hassle-free. You give the chief minister money, the chief minister, in this case, say earlier Jayalalitha and many other chief ministers, they know as efficient by the industry when they're just say, once you give us the money, we will deliver. Do not worry about the second minister or the third minister. Now you turn this into, which means you're even removing the decentralization from the political party itself. You're disenfranchising the other political actors except for the one who's sitting on top. And to me, at many other levels, taking up from the session earlier, and I'll end here, the trouble with electoral bonds and this kind of funding is that it centralizes in a way that we haven't imagined before. It disenfranchises different segments of our society in a way where we haven't seen, we perhaps have a symptom of, and it makes it all legal. The only layer left is morality, and that can go step away when Supreme Court says, oh, well, why don't you just disclose and it'll be fine. And then you would have ended in the realm that US now lives, saying lobbying openly is fair. And I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nitin, for that passionate statement on which also questioned some of the received wisdoms that we had about how elections actually work and what electoral corruption actually is. I'll next invite Roshan Kishore. He's a data and political economy editor at the Hindustan Times, where his work largely involves data-driven commentary and reportage on the intersection of politics and economics. He holds an MPhil degree in economics from the Jawaharlal Nehru University and has been a visiting fellow at the Center for Advanced Study of India at the University of Pennsylvania. You will see a lot of bylines from Roshan with a lot of numbers in Hindustan Times, and I look forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. My fellow panelists, thank you, Asian College of Journalism, for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to, most importantly, the students. Job is much easier after excellent presentations by Qureshi Saab and Nitin. I have a slightly different take, so I'd start. One can take two views of the problem with the nature of electoral funding or the larger political finance regime in this country as of now. The first view, not necessarily wrong, I mean, we hear about it every day, is that the BJP, which is, an extremely dominant political party in our country today, is like completely almost monopolized political finance. It is collecting far more money, it is spending far more money than anybody else does. And, political finance is almost like the state of political competition in this country today. It is increasingly becoming one-sided. But then, to be sure, it is not that, the problem per se has arisen for the first time in our history. Like Nitin explained that in great detail, ruling parties, especially parties ruling the center, have been known to have access to far more funding, than any other political party has had at the state level or smaller political parties or that thing. So I think the problem is more with the scale of the problem under the current regime rather than the nature of the problem itself. Where one can legitimately criticize the BJP, I think, is that they have actually made it more one-sided and opaque through implicit and explicit use of the state machinery. The explicit use electoral bonds, Nitin has spoken at great length about, I don't think we need to talk about it. The implicit rule, I would say, is the selective use of investigative agencies of the state. Almost every day now the Enforcement Directorate is raiding locations. These locations are either of opposition leaders or of business aids of opposition parties in this country. No matter what you say, I would also say that it is very difficult to argue that the money which is being raided has not been gotten through corrupt means. How else do you see so much cash sitting? And all of us know that it exists. So, it is unfair because, it is very difficult for a non-state actor, journalist or anybody else to prove that, what the BJP is doing is actually doing an error of omission. It is only going after certain sources of corruption, whereas it is not going after certain other sources of corruption. Political leaders who are against the BJP, if they join the BJP, all cases against them disappear. Once again, this is not something which is happening for the first time in this country, but I mean the scale of it, I mean where one has to give it to the BJP is that it has become so brazen that the moment you say go against the BJP, you would have a raid or something like that. I mean the opacity bit of electoral bonds I don't need to talk about. The problem as far as I see with this kind of an argument is the following. Why do I think that this is not like, it is the correct criticism, but it is not, I think, enough as if one has to criticize the nature of electoral or political finance in this country, is that the nature of the problem is circular. And I think this goes beyond political finance. A lot of what was being spoken in the pre-lunch session also. So what do people say is the problem? The problem people say is that, the BJP is actually, because it is in government, it is actually abusing institutions, it is actually abusing or sort of, browbeating provisions of the constitutions to make these changes to laws or regulations. Some regulations are not being made, some are being flouted, and therefore it is actually vitiating, say, a level playing field in Indian politics. And therefore the BJP is winning elections. Now the problem is, if the BJP is in power and it is abusing power to keep these changes, because of which it will keep winning elections, then it also means that the BJP will never lose elections. So I think, this is a pretty self-defeating argument as far as politics is concerned. And like to go back to a lot of what was being discussed in the pre-lunch session about the nature of fiscal federalism or other things. You see, I like to think that, it is very important, if you stay in a country, if you want to write about a country, if you want to report about a country, it is very important to understand institutions, understand rules, understand how governance works, etc. And I would say with all our limitations, I mean, you have to look at the subcontinent and other countries in the global south. I would say India even today has done a much, much better job of, we are still a young democracy. I think, look at Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, other places. We have done a phenomenally good job of being a democracy, barring that thing under the emergency. But I also think that if you're thinking that actually, institutions can control politics in any society, it is basically like thinking that the tail can wag the dog. Never happens in real life. It is always politics which will control institutions. So, how does one have a larger criticism of political finance in India? Let me begin by asking a simple question. Goes to what Nitin was talking about. I mean, this is a country where during the pandemic, the BJP government actually gave free food, 5 kilo rice, 5 kilo wheat, some kilo, 1 kilo of salt or something, to 80 crore people. That's almost 2/3 of our country's population. More than anything is, and the BJP and the Prime Minister, they have now made those PDS provisions free. In real terms, it basically means savings of a few hundred rupees for a household. That's it. That is the monetary value of the thing. The BJP, the Prime Minister keeps harping upon it. They think it has given them political benefits. They think it will continue to give them political benefits. More than anything, this basically shows that a very large share of our country's population, we may choose to call them poor, technically speaking, or not call them poor, they are basically extremely poor. What separates them from, say, starvation and life is basically those 5 kilos of food grains. Now, in this country, where around 80 crore people have to live on this kind of a handout from the state, why should you have elections which are now, by some estimates, the most expensive in the world? No other country spends more in elections than we do. Once again, 2014 and the period after that might have worsened this problem, but this problem has existed since much before that. I mean, it would be gross intellectual dishonesty to say that elections were clean or this kind of money was not spent. So what model is better? Is, like Nitin actually made this interesting, and I think it is a very important question to ask. Which model is better? Is the model of a hegemonic political party, which is extremely politically dominant today, controlling not only political funding, but political funding right at the level of the top, where even party actors do not get access to funding? Is that a better model? Or should we have a model which, like Nitin described, works in the Northeast, but actually works in pretty much every state in the country? What is the operative part of the second model? It basically means that in a state like Tamil Nadu, no matter how progressive you call it, whatever, and there have been progressive legacies of the Dravidian movement, unless you can give a few thousand rupees to voters, you do not stand a chance of winning elections. In a state which is perhaps the poorest in the country, my home state, Bihar, even if you are contesting a panchayat election, you basically have to spend money. Millions of rupees are spent in panchayat elections. So which model is better? I think to be able to even engage with this question, we have to actually try and ask a different question. Why is it that the BJP today has the kind of political dominance in our country which no other party has had? 1984 was a different kind of an election. That question I do not think can be answered unless you engage with the political economy of Indian markets or Indian capitalism or Indian economy, whichever you may choose to call it. What explains the BJP's political dominance today? The way I see it, there are three things. First is a core voter base, which basically says, even if I have to sell my house, as long as Hindutva is in power, I'll vote for the BJP. That voter base has been there historically in our country. The RSS is a 100-year-old project. The Jansangh used to exist before the BJP. Even at the peak of the Babri demolition, I think that voter base would have been around 20%, not more than that. So I don't think the BJP is only winning elections because of that voter base. I think there are two other elements to the BJP's current political dominance today. The most important element is that there's an extremely large voter base of very poor people who feel personally obliged to the Prime Minister because of the welfare schemes which has been given to them under this government. They can be houses, they can be LPG cylinders, they can be toilets, they can be piped water, they can be anything. The BJP has done a phenomenally good job of actually politically weaponizing this welfare delivery and sort of taking political attribution and benefit for it. You can't blame a political party for doing politics. It's fair game. The third most important component of the BJP support base is that it has very committed support from the big business of this country. I think this kind of political support from big business of this country is also unprecedented. Now, if you look at formal sources of funding data, even when the UPA 2 was in power, the BJP would actually do much better. I mean, they would actually fall behind when you took the unaccounted money, but in terms of corporate money, the BJP would do better even then. Are there any contradictions in this, tripartite, strategy of the BJP? The way I see it, there are two contradictions. Now, the poor in this country, who are, actually the Labharthi, quote-unquote, section of the BJP, have had historical antagonism with local political actors. And this Rajiv Gandhi's infamous statement that if I send 1 rupee from the center, only 10 paisa or 15 paisa gets delivered. All of us know that it is a fact. Why does the panchayat level candidate in Bihar spend, say, 50 lakh rupees? Because he basically hopes to usurp at least 50% of the money that comes to the panchayat. Same goes for MLA, MP, minister, etc. I mean, you have a ration scam, you have question paper leaks and that kind of stuff. The big business, which actually, what does the big business want in India today? Reliance at one point of time made the petrochemical refinery, which was the most cutting-edge refinery, not only in India, but perhaps the world. What is Reliance getting into today? It is getting into retail. It is basically opening toy stores. It is basically selling vegetables to you. The big business today wants more and more parts of the economy, which were actually dominated by, even today are dominated by the informal sector. That is the route the big business in this country has seen to make money. This entire gig economy, startup boom, what is it essentially about? It is essentially about formalizing what used to exist in the small sector. You have had one successful political mobilization against it, which was the farm laws. Like, I'm not saying, Indian agriculture or the state of it in Punjab is perfect today, but that was the basic contradiction there. This directly hurts, the core Hindutva constituency of the BJP. Historically, the BJP has been referred to as a Brahmin Banya party in this country. The Marwadis actually, they have built the BJP in their sweat and blood in this country. And this is where the source of the political funding, if you read Akshay Mukul's excellent book about Gita Press and the history of Hindutva in this country, the Marwadis have actually played the vanguard role in sort of building Hindutva in this country. I went to Ranchi, I studied in Ranchi for my +2. I went there during the 2019 elections. So, a lot of East Indian states actually have a center of Marwadi business, like it's Bada Bazaar in Calcutta. And I saw that the Marwadis had put up a candidate of their own against the BJP. So I asked them, what's going on? This is your political party. He said, they don't even listen to us now because they don't even need our money. So we know that the guy is going to win, but we just want to at least make a statement by putting our candidate here. Now, why are these two contradictions not pulling down the BJP, like they pulled many other governments in the past? I think the BJP's political genius lies in the fact that it has been able to create an arrangement where, the informal economy actors have been convinced about the BJP's necessity for extra economic factors. What it can be like 2000 years of slavery has ended. It can be that the mandir is finally being built. These things have political appeal. You can fault people in the north, for like voting for mandir and not for education, but, their vote, fortunately or unfortunately, matters as much as, say, the more enlightened people. So if you want to live in the Indian democracy, you have to deal with it. That's one. But I think, so that sort of allows them to open more and more areas for big business, which is where most of the money is coming from. The BJP doesn't need the Chota Marwadi Seth's money anymore. They don't need it. The increased funding from big business has actually made the BJP less dependent on state-level actors. So the minister in, say, a state actually doesn't need to collect money and send to the center for fighting election, which was the quintessential Congress model of political finance in our country. It has always been. So the joke even today in Delhi is that the Congress is a very poor party. There are still very rich congressmen in the states. A lot of people have made a lot of money. So this is exactly what Mr. Modi talks about. When he talks about, I have actually ended the middlemen. There's actually a very large element of truth to this story. If you go to states in North India, it is a fact. There might be errors of, say, wrong exclusion because of things such as Aadhaar and all. But the middleman who actually used to make money from the PDS shop at the village level, he would then give it to, say, the district supply officer. The district supply officer would give it to the DM, and the DM would have to give it to the minister. That channel is actually ending. The BJP is actually putting a squeeze on that channel. So this is the BJP's model now. The opposition, what does it have? It is still struggling whether to live with big business or not live with big business, because Mr. Rahul Gandhi likes to abuse Adani, whereas you actually see Davos, a newly elected Congress chief minister, sharing stage with Mr. Adani and trying for investments and things. They don't know what to tell big business. They don't know what to sell to big business that they should actually help them vote out the BJP. The big business has never had it better in this country. And they are depending more and more on these local level actors for political money. So which is why you have stuff like, say, question paper leaks and all that, etc. And the more you do this, the more you face the anger of the poor, and the more you come under the investigative arms of the state. So it's actually a very tight fix for the opposition parties in this country. Is there a way out of the problem? In theory, it's very simple. Why should we not have politicians in this country who actually don't need black money to contest elections? Because, like Mr. Qureshi said, there's documentary evidence from however contaminated, election expenditure data is, that the richest guy doesn't necessarily win elections. I'm just finishing, I'm done. So why can we not have politicians who can actually be anti-big business, not from a dogmatic perspective, but on genuine grounds, who can actually help the poor, without sort of doing corruption? I think you basically have to look at the state of opposition leadership in our country. Most of our parties, the Congress and regional parties included, are extremely corrupt. Most of these parties are family-owned enterprises. In many cases, they are also family-owned business enterprises. Most of these parties, and this unfortunately now actually also includes the left, they have actually come to the conclusion that the best way to win elections in this country is basically use the fiscal capacity of the state to give money to the people. So basically, you give 3,000 rupees, I will give you 5,000 rupees. You make election cylinders for 400 rupees, I will give it to you for 300 rupees. Now the problem with that is, now even if all of fiscal federalism and the problems which were discussed in the first session were to go away, we as a country are nowhere close to income levels which would support a welfare state such as what is seen in the Nordic. We are still a poor country, we don't have that kind of money to be able to distribute. Even if we were to say, reverse the corporate tax cuts, how much money are you going to get at the end of the day? You actually want to transform people's lives through fiscal intervention, you have to be like a Saudi Arabia, that the Arab Spring comes and you basically fill people's bank accounts with money. That you might not have a democracy, but I'm giving you a few $100, you keep it and I'll give you more. We don't have that kind of money. What this welfare delivery has done is, it has actually prevented destitution in our country, it has done certain good things, but I think it has effectively demobilized political parties and people at large from actually trying to highlight, precipitate class contradictions in our society. You actually don't have class politics in the old sense of the term in this country. Basically, the idea is left, right, center, whoever comes, whatever tax, non-tax you're getting, give some money to the people. Now, as long as that is happening, I don't see this changing. Now, people might say that I'm actually making a very defeatist kind of an argument. And I think the problem with a lot of the opposition leadership, and some very well-meaning commentators also, is that they are somehow, in criticizing the problem of the political finance regime or the larger political economy regime today, wishing for restoration of a certain kind of status quo ante, that things maybe should go back to what they were earlier. I think it is also an opportunity and a time to ask a very serious question, that the kind of uneven development we have had in this country, and the kind of diversity we have in this country, and all said and done, we are still a democracy. If you have to have this kind of uneven development, then is something like the BJP, where you actually have at the top a leader who is extremely popular, who knows how to balance economic pain with, say, extra economic appeal or whatever you may call it, is it not the natural culmination for a country like ours? My belief is that unless politics at the grassroots does not change, unless you do not get out of this, throw a few thousand rupees at people to get votes, unless political actors do not start highlighting genuine class contradictions, the BJP and the kind of regime which we have, I think is the natural choice for a country like India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roshan. We now have time till 3:50, according to the organizers, for a discussion. As during every other session, you could raise your hand, and I will arbitrarily choose, but I'll try to be geographically, I will try to preserve some equity. Distributed, yes. Yes, gentlemen there, yeah. The rules hold one question and only a question, not a speech. Yeah.
My name is Atul, and my question is to Roshan Kishore. Sir, you spoke about efficient welfare delivery system, put in by BJP. Do you think that sort of system is gonna, over time, gonna undermine caste politics, because a common man wouldn't need somebody of his caste in a local office to get his work done, or maybe to get access to certain welfare scheme?
Thank you. Do you want to? Yeah, that part, let's change it a little bit. We will take a few questions and then one by one. Okay, okay. Then let's, Roshan, answer it. It's okay.
As far as, the question of, will it change power relations in villages, I think that is an important part in which caste politics works in India. I think it is already changing. Yes. As far as the larger question about caste politics is concerned, I think, it is far more complicated. For example, we like to talk about, say, categories such as OBCs and upper caste and Dalits. Now we know that there are fissures even within those categories. Like the BJP has actually brought out something like a Rohini Commission report. So I think, caste politics are not, I think it's a more complicated answer, but yes, it will definitely change power relations in villages. And I think dominant castes are actually witnessing an erosion of power. So that part definitely holds true. But I will not be confident enough to say that it will end caste politics itself in our country. We can discuss it later if you want.
My question is again to Mr. Kishore. In your exposition, you said that elections in India are one of the most expensive activities, right? So what I want to understand from this is, I get very curious to know what you think of the policy or the concept of one nation, one election, because that one argument that supports that particular proposition from the government side is the fact that elections are very expensive. So to cut down on the elections expenditure, we can have one nation, one election. But as we have seen in the pre-lunch sessions, the threat to federalism if we go ahead with this policy is probably equally harmful. So I want to understand from the exposition that you provided, which side of the two arguments do you think we higher?
Qureshi Sahib is more equipped to answer this question. But, we started with one nation, one election. The reason we do not have one nation, one election is some governments fell in between. Now, the question, if you want to do one nation, one election, is what do? Do you dismiss some government, say, well, boss, you take a back seat, now we are actually going to have one nation, one elections? Currently, our constitution doesn't permit the central government to do that. I think it suits the BJP to have one nation, one election, because, one of the things where the BJP still actually struggles, which is where the hegemony is not complete, are state elections. To give a particular example, I mean, I think the BJP would love to see Mr. Yedurappa in Karnataka sidelined. But the moment you get rid of him, you actually lose the elections. So this happened after 2013 elections. Before 2014, they rehabilitated Mr. Yedurappa. They've had to do it again. So it perhaps, maybe take some more time for the BJP to do this. But the reason we do not have one nation, one election is not this. The reason is, if a government falls in between, what do you do? I mean, will you do what is happening to the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, not hold elections? I think that is a principal violation of democracy. So I don't know how they can get around this problem, without, say, outrightly dismissing governments, which I think, no matter what the Supreme Court does, they will have to strike it down. So let's see how they go about it. A view on this doesn't matter necessarily. It's a purely logistical problem at the moment.
Not just for the past, but for the future also.
Yeah.
What if one government falls in the middle of those 5 years tomorrow? You'll wait for 5 years to have the next election there. That's also there. Kurish Sahab, you want to say something on this?
Actually, I have said a lot on this in paper and on the TV, and half the girls spoke to me after the lunch break. They asked me the same question. So,
Let us also hear it.
there are pros and cons of this issue. Pros, voter is the same for all three tiers. Polling station where you will go and vote is the same. District administration which conducts all three elections are the same. Security apparatus is the same. Therefore, for you to go and instead of pressing one button in one election, you press all the three buttons, you should be happy. In any case, election commission should be very happy, because we conduct one election, play golf for 5 years and come back again to conduct the next election. But our convenience cannot be the consideration. Some leader of BJD once in a public forum asked a very good question. What is that the people want? Most people in India are extremely poor. The so-called educated, the rich people don't come and vote, and they brag about it. I've never voted in my life. They told their moustache, I've never voted in my life. So instead of feeling embarrassed and ashamed about it, who are the people who come and vote? The poorest of the poor. Because this is the only power they have. And if the election happens repeatedly, their power gets asserted. The accountability of the politician increases. How many times have we read in the papers, you're all journalists, wanted, missing, MP is missing for 4 years, MLA is missing for 4 years, 5 years, because after winning the election they never come back. Is that the system that we want? So, therefore, repeated election is a good idea. I was once attending a youth parliament in Pune, MIT Pune, where one young girl from Chhattisgarh made a very interesting slogan, which I still remember and I sighed. She says, "Jab jab chunav aata hai, गरीब के पेट में पुलाव आता है." Now, it is now the 60,000 crores which we are talking about, too expensive. I think 60,000 crore getting recycled, black money of politicians going to the laborer, driver, painter. I think that is very good for the economy. There are so many economists sitting here. I think some interpretation should be done, a serious study, whether it is good for economy. So after all, from politicians, the money is getting transferred. Therefore, one nation, one election, the downside, Prime Minister initially talked about money, that a lot of money is spent, and secondly, the entire work comes to a standstill because of the prolonged model code. I have written many articles because both these arguments are spurious. One, 60,000 crore, as I said, perhaps it's a good idea to have 60,000 crores spent in the election, but this 60,000 can be brought down to 6,000 crores if only one of my suggestions put a cap on the political party expenditure. You said you want it is too much of expenditure, the solution is in your hand, do it, who is stopping you? They are not doing it. Secondly, election can be expedited. I can do an election to you in 33 days. So look at that possibility. So finally, the Prime Minister also realized at that time that there are problems, which is why he said he wants a national debate on it. He did not push it down the throat of the nation. And the debate has been going on for 10 years. Now he is losing patience. Now this, this measure of appointing the former Rashtrapati to chair this committee, personally I felt very offended because Rashtrapati's designation is so high to drag him into this. And do you think just because he is heading the committee, everybody will fall in line? Oh, us committee ne kaha hai, chalo maan lo, unhone kaha hai. What nonsense. You should know that every committee's recommendation first goes to the law ministry where it is examined by the section officer and under secretary. Now imagine a committee headed by the former Rashtrapati and being examined by a section officer. It's an insult to the Rashtrapati. And frankly, I am also very curious. I've written almost a dozen articles on the subject and hundreds of speeches here and there. I'm also trying to see what magic wand this brilliant committee is going to produce to us.
Nitin, you wanted to say something?
No, I think
No, go ahead.
No, just quickly, I think when a politician who entirely depends on patronage as a system of showing how he takes care of his people starts talking of efficiency as a critical reason to make decisions or critical reasons for US citizens to make choices, you are in a gray zone. Efficiency is a word that politicians very often use when they want to counter any principles of equity and equality. And it does happen. Everywhere when middle classes and upper middle classes love the idea of efficiency of money spent because we believe we are the epitomes of good money spent, etc. It always comes at the cost of the poor. It always comes at the cost of distributive justice. And these are trade-offs that we must live with. Unfortunately, this Instagram world, we want to look at black and whites. Is this good or is it bad? As if you hear Roshan and Dr. Qureshi, there's a range of gray in this. You have to make those choices and the trade-offs to make. And you have to constantly grade yourself better than go worse. Those choices, I think you as students of journalism or professionals in journalism need to work in those grays rather than work in black and white. Is this bad? Is this good? There's a whole range in between this. That range decides where different segments of society end up in different points down the line. I would, sorry, it sounds patronizing because I have a gray beard, but tend to ask questions that will allow us also to answer in grays rather than say 1 or 0. That digital answers are really boring in some ways. For you, I'm sure as well.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Manas. A question for all three of you. And this question is actually about bare bones elections. Not particularly about the funding mess or the funding part, but about elections. Because elections, I feel, are the manifestation of power, how power moves from a citizen to an office and how that translates into the into society and into the economy. I come from Maharashtra where there are 27 municipalities, and currently all the municipalities are being headed by the state government itself, not by the elected mayoral, by the candidate who has won the mayoral elections. That is because mayoral elections have not been held in any of those constituencies ever since the last term ended. I would like to know what does that mean for that particular region or that particular state, or what does this particular phenomenon indicate for the future? Because power clearly is not being transferred from citizens of that constituency into an office.
I actually have a very short answer to your question. Elections have not been held. BMC has not been held, I think, since what, like 2-3 years now, 2 years, yeah. Nobody seems to be missing the BMC. This is a very important point. For all, the waxing eloquent, politicians do, including our opposition, about how democracy is in threat and all that. In practice, they've actually delegitimized democracy so much that nobody gives a damn. Now, unless you can be the BJP, you can be any other political party, unless you go back and bring that, build back that organic link, with the masses, it will not happen. And this is not to be partisan, but I'll actually, give you an example. The CPIM, when it actually, won the first election in West Bengal in 1977, the emergency had just ended and all that. Its people, actually, they were under such a siege that they actually filed nominations and went back underground a lot of their candidates. Still won the elections. I mean, it was the people at the end of the day who actually defeated them, when they lost in 2011. But if your democratic legitimacy, you are more of a nuisance rather than, say, a democratic asset to the people at large, the people don't give a damn about you. And for that, nobody else is responsible. I mean, two opposition parties have been split. I think one, is more a business empire than an opposition party, I'm sorry. Nobody seems to be taking a clear ideological position. So people understand, they will take the, benefits or whatever you give them because, they are poor at the end of the day. But they know that it's not an ideological battle you're fighting. You're basically fighting for your self-interest. Some of it trickles down to me also. And so be it.
I wish, Kishore. I wish that was the case. I mean, wait, I'm not this. I'm not. No. No, but the point is, I think it's not quite an accurate reading to say that because from an ideal point of view something appears to be very wrong, you have so much faith in the electoral process that you are sure that the good will win and the bad will lose. It doesn't happen. I mean, you have seen when you split a party, you have split a whole electorate in a very efficient way, right? And who has the upper hand in the Maharashtra elections after whatever your view of the two parties may be, or my view of the two parties may be, that split has had a very decisive impact on the electorate because you have no idea the amount of money flowing through the Shinde faction, though they have zero treasury to bank on. It's extraordinary because every action on the ground is grooved with money. Whoever has money, people will go to them. Whoever has money, there is a certain attraction that you're able to generate from different groups. Because the whole electoral process is about money. Rallies, demonstrations, who has money, there's a move towards them. It's not appropriate to think that our electoral process is so neat and tidy that the bad will always get defeated. Not necessarily so. That's all I'm saying. It's not,
Can I jump in? Because we are at least having fun now.
yeah. Join more the merrier.
So nice that we're disagreeing. It's quite boring otherwise, particularly after lunch. I think it's a lovely question to ask. What happens when your grassroots democracy, it's a stupid phrase, but if you call it that, is not functioning, is not being allowed to function? It's not as if that grassroots, that layer of democracy disappears. It goes under the labyrinth. There's a new network of political patronage that is created that may not function through those institutions you wanted, or that the constitution said should exist, the Panchayati Raj system, etc., etc. That may not exist, but there's an entire patronage system that works top-down all the way down. How efficient, inefficient, or which players lose or gain out of it, I think is a question that as journalists we must ask more. Than to say, it's fine for the political class that came before us to say, oh, third layer of democracy is not working, this government has rendered them useless, etc., which is fine. That's for a YouTube chap in 5 minutes to say an end. For us to ask the next question is, what is replacing it? What are the layers of political relationships that are being built that you and I may not be able to access or understand at first go because we also come from a certain class. We think there's an absence or there's vacuum over there. There's obviously not vacuum. As he said, there's money floating through. It's not going through those institutions. So again, sorry, my reference points are very limited to Northeast because that's where I lived much of my political life or social life. There is a formal structure of third Panchayati Raj in many Northeast states, different than the 5th schedule and the other areas in India. But there's a formal structure where you elect Panchayati leaders, they call Gaon Budas and other things. There's a traditional layer of also the third tier of governance that we also have in parallel. In the Khasi Hills in Meghalaya, it's a kingship system which has a prime minister, a judicial system. In Arunachal, in my part, say we have a Kebang, we have democratic, non-democratic, hierarchical systems of our own. They're all working in parallel. If you look at the Government of India records of what is happening, there's only Panchayati Raj happening in Arunachal. There is no record of what we do, but all our justice dispensation, all our land record dealings, all dispute settlements are actually done in that so-called informal economy of politics. I think in many other places in India, and Roshan, who is a much better student and a consistent student of rest of India, would correct me if I'm wrong, that there is active, furtive politics happening regardless of whether those institutions are being crumbling down. Those you must read to understand what is really happening. Therefore, I think what Roshan points out, I completely agree. It's very easy to say, oh, BJP is this monolith, full stop. Or, opposition is crying about, as a journalist, I also obviously will write about who's in the power and I will crib and complain about them. That's how we come out looking. But the fact is there are labyrinths and layers of a very febrile network of politics that is in operation. We must understand that, otherwise we are the fools that sit in Delhi, Bombay, or couple of cities and imagine rest of country is gone to dogs because they'll all vote for a mandir. There needs to be a better understanding for us. Otherwise, we are failing ourselves.
What, 2 minutes?
No, because this is fun part.
We are now in the business of provoking. Many people, including my wife, has told me that I more and more sound like a radical BJP apologist. This is not to disagree with what Professor Ramkumar said, but what I'm trying to make is a larger point. Democracy, even today, is not something the world has been practicing for centuries. We were actually one of the first countries in the world to have universal suffrage. The Americans got it much later, etc., etc. You cannot, and there's no socialist bloc in the world today. So capitalism is the only game in town. You cannot talk about democracy without, when I entered, Professor Ramkumar was actually talking about, without talking about how capitalism has evolved, not just in India, but other places also. Essentially, a lot of, the money which is being produced in the economy is being produced by very few people. You might be a Keynesian, but if you are a government, you have to do an FRBM because bond markets, this is what bond markets want. Ultimately, you go and borrow abroad. If you don't do FRBM, it goes haywire. The point I'm trying to make is, that you actually started during the Cold War with some kind of a golden age experiment. That ended, with the neoliberal revolution. The socialist bloc collapsed under its own contradictions. I think one of the biggest reasons was they could not get their prices right, more than anything else. I'm not even talking about the ideological decay in the communist bloc. The Chinese have actually shown us that it is possible to build capitalism, improve living standards without democracy. And there are a lot of people in India, I think, in the mainstream political spectrum, from the left to the right, who actually deep within believe that the Chinese way is the best way we should have gone. People have tried to do it, some successfully, some not so successfully. Where this government is actually taking us, I think, is increasingly to the Chinese way, where the central government will actually give mandates to local governments, federal governments. Job has to be done, job will be done. If you do it well, person and government will be rewarded, if not, penalized. That is the way we are going towards. If we really want to have functional democracy, I think the question to ask is it even possible in this kind of a setup? This is where I'm trying to say, you can, do welfare transfers and all those things, and they sound very nice and egalitarian and all that. But I think they are all efforts to actually mute class contradictions rather than aggravate them. What are the, people are now getting Nobel Prizes for doing RCTs, on what the real questions in development economics are. The questions to me are very simple. Let a political party in this country take a position that we are actually for food inflation in this country, because let the farmers get that money. And let another political party take a position, we are against food inflation in this country. What do you see? A debate on OPS. How many people benefit out of the OPS in this country, you tell me? How many people are in the government? The new jobs which are being created in the government even today, what share of those jobs will actually are even regular jobs? Everybody wants to offend nobody is the unanimity in our politics. People have forgotten how to do class politics. How is it that the Shiv Sena, which actually, Bal Thackeray might have practiced communal politics, but people were shit scared of him. The Maratha working class actually swore by the Shiv Sena. The BJP took their political party right under their feet. Not even like 10 people actually protested in Bombay. How do you explain the de-weaponization of a political party like the Shiv Sena? Mr. Sharad Pawar's party, they built the so-called cooperative movement. How many farmers have protested? So this is what I'm talking about. I'm not saying the world is fair. I'm actually talking about a dialectic. Since we started doing our economic reforms, since a lot of money was generated in India, it came into politics in India, it has a vested interest in controlling politics in India. Earlier you had to go to the secretary during the license Raj, please tweak, custom rules for a day, my shipment is coming. Now it's fair game. Everybody can play that game. I think the scale of it has completely changed. And what we are actually seeing is that, this the phase we have had since, say, the 2000s until, say, 2014 or something, this phase could not have lasted forever in India, is my point. So in that dialectic, you have actually moved to a situation where you have a pro-business government, which can actually tackle temporary economic anger with, say, religious polarization, and has actually completely disempowered the local level political actors to make a direct contact to the poor. Unless you take this model head on and try and develop something else, I think everything else, it can give you short-term, quote-unquote, victories here and there, but it's not going to take care of the larger problem, is the point I'm making.
There. I think that'll be the last question.
Hello, my name is Ahuna and my question is to Dr. Qureshi. One of the solutions that you talked about to electoral funding mess of India was that there should be a national electoral trust and then funds would be allocated to various parties based on their performance. So how would this judgment of performance happen? What kind of framework would facilitate that?
Votes that you get. And I've mentioned it very clearly, it will be based on the number of votes that you get. And that is a figure which cannot be fudged. Everyone knows that this number, that number, and I said even if an independent wants, with having got one vote, we'll give him 100 rupees. So although maybe when we go into the detail, independence can be excluded, people getting less than 1% can be excluded, but even if we have to give to everybody, so, but it should be based on performance. Otherwise, if you start giving fund beforehand, okay, look, this activity will be public funded. I assure you, within 30 days, there will be 3,000 new parties formed. Free माल बट रहा है, सरकार पैसे दे रही है, बनाओ पार्टी, लड़ो इलेक्शन होगा और उसमें से what they do is normally in the party, every political party gives to the candidates. Some parties take from the candidates to give them ticket, but there are others who give them money to contest election, 2 crores, of which any potential loser knows that he is going to lose. He will pocket 1.5 crores and spend some money, token. So this kind of deception game goes on all the time. So we need to do something about it. One thing I would like to mention more to lighten the thing, you know, the 40 modus operandi of cheating which I have mentioned, one of which was very interesting and we discovered somewhere in Tamil Nadu. Normally, even giving a cup of tea to a voter is considered corruption and bribe, which can lead to cancellation of the election. So we saw that MLAs, MPs, these candidates look for excuses. Every birthday party, every Mundan ceremony, everything happens just before the election. So we saw our observers saw some marriage party where 3,000 people and liquor flowing and chicken flying. So he went in to see and greet the bride and bridegroom. There was no bride and bridegroom. It was a bogus, fake marriage party only to bribe the voters. I listed it in my 40. Now, but to think that I'm very smart and I've outsmarted them, I'll be stupid because they're smarter than us. Now also bogus marriage party will be happening and there will be a rented bride and a rented bridegroom standing with a printed voting, the invitation card for the wedding. So all proofs. So no, this is the kind of technique that these guys adopt. We have to be alert and somehow find a way to stop these things.
Thank you, Qureshi Saab. Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, Roshan, for the engaging set of discussions. There's a lot of food for thought here, and I'm sure.
And two things. I want to give this book to Mr. Sashikumar, but I have very clearly written it is for the library. And if I give him 7 days to read it, if on the 8th day you don't find it in the library, please call me up. Second, I have spent half my civil service career with the youth in the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sport. In 40 kilometers from here on Mysore Road, Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Youth Development, you must have heard of it, my baby, born here, and I created it. And my advice, unsolicited advice to all of you, don't be backbenchers. You know, I have been wanting to take a picture to send to my family, but I did not because all these empty seats are a very poor statement. Now, these are the kind for you journalists, if it is a politician's meeting, These empty chairs make a lovely news, a beautiful picture, and they will be, therefore, always try and fill the front seats first. Being a backbencher is in principle a bad idea. If you want to be leaders in life, which you have to be, you have to lead the nation. Please, from the next session, sit in front. Thank you.